Hello and welcome everyone to the 7th annual Dr. Paul Kalanithi Writing Award event. We are delighted that you are joining us this evening. My name is Jacqueline Genovese. I'm the executive director for the Medical Humanities and Art program here at Stanford in the Center for Biomedical Ethics. And on behalf of our Medical Humanities and Arts team, I want to say welcome to all of you to this celebration. And the lovely thing about celebrations is it's also about gratitude as well, and thinking about what we have to be grateful for. And I just want to express absolute gratitude to everyone who submitted to this contest, not just this year, but in years past, and to our judges who are amazing humans who, as you will learn, are accomplished writers and physicians in their own right, and who have taken the time to participate in this really meaningful contest. One of our judges, Dr. Baruch, could not be here, but also wanted to extend thanks to him as well. Also want to thank Christy Hartman, who is our wonderful program coordinator and makes things happen, makes the magic happen. And also later tonight, you will see some beautiful illustrations by one of our recent Stanford graduate students who graduated from Stanford. She is currently a postbac, and Tenzin Wandak Yotak. Tenzin, I hope I said your name correctly. So what we're going to do is, wanted to say, if you could put your questions, if you have questions or comments for our award winners in the Q&A, and we will have time at the end to answer all of your questions together. So for those of you who don't know, Dr. Paul Kalanithi was a graduate of the Stanford Neurosurgery residency program. And before he passed, he wrote an amazing, amazing book, When Breath Becomes Air, a global bestseller, translated into 40 languages, nominated for the Pulitzer Prize. But it's just a wonderful, reflective book, and I just highly recommend it to everybody. You don't have to be in medicine. You don't, it's really about sort of what's important in life, and so beautifully written, with a foreword by Dr. Abraham Verghese and a beautiful epilogue by Dr. Lucy Kalanithi, who you will meet soon here. So first, what we wanted to do was show a excerpt of a video that one of our wonderful colleagues, Mark Hanlon in Stanford Communications, created. This is an excerpt to give you a little introduction to Paul and sort of the get a sense of the spirit behind this contest. So Christy, I believe, is going to share screen and start the video. Thank you.
There is a disjunction in time between how I perceive time and how I perceive my daughter Katie's time, because I'm not going to see, most likely, that growing up happen. And the faster Katie grows up, the faster I'm not there. At the same time, every day is an exciting, rewarding, meaningful time to spend with her. Hope is a very funny thing. Certainly as a doctor, I felt it was very important, and the way in which patients come to understand and make meaning of their diseases. And the way hope functions for me now as a patient, it's a careful balance. If you don't think about the bad case, that ending is going to be very rough on you and your family. But if you don't think about the good case, you're going to miss an opportunity to really make the most out of your life and time.
Hey, Jackie, you're muted.
Probably a good thing because I was getting choked up. That video is just always very moving, and the what Paul said about hope and time was something we wanted to capture as well with this contest. And Dr. Steve Ash, together with our wonderful benefactor Jean Collier Hurley and Dr. Kalanithi, created this contest as one way to sort of mark Paul's legacy. And with that, I'm fangirling and excited to introduce Dr. Kalanithi, who this has been a wonderful part of this project, is getting to know Lucy over the years. And Katie, who you saw in the video, Paul and Lucy's daughter, is now in 3rd grade and is proud that she now has adult teeth, replacing her baby teeth that she lost last year. She's quite a spark plug. And I love hearing stories about her. But Lucy is just as kind and as she is intelligent and passionate about her patients and about healthcare and making change, positive change in healthcare. She is a clinical professor here in the School of Medicine, and she has been on stage as a TED Med speaker and has been named University of Washington's Cancer Center 100 amazing people. Of course, we knew that as well. So I would love to turn it over now to Lucy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jackie. And I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of the whole Kalanithi family. I think Paul's parents may be trying to get on the Zoom, or they'll see the video later. And so that's really wonderful. And the quality of the writing that comes into this contest is such an honor to read. It's really wonderful for me to be part of this ongoing adventure in narrative medicine. And again, thank you to the entrants, because the pieces that you'll hear tonight are so beautiful. And it's really exciting that they all actually came from trainees. So I think this is the first time that was the case. But thank you again. I'm going to just say a few words about the benefactor for this prize, who is Jean Hurley. She is somebody who's engaged in multiple activities linked to written, visual, and strategic communication. She's a philanthropist who supports nonprofit organizations emphasizing palliative care, social justice, and the promotion of the visual arts. As an urban photographer, she's currently working on a project in Berlin. She's a Stanford MLA graduate, the author of a thesis on making decisions for end-of-life care, and she was an inaugural fellow in the 2015 Stanford Distinguished Careers Institute. As a breast cancer survivor, she was the catalyst behind the creation of a survivor's butterfly symbol for a New York Cancer Foundation. So I'm just going to read a message that she wanted to share today, since she can't be on this virtual event. She said, "It has been a pleasure and an honor to support the Kalanithi Award since its inception. When I had breast cancer, and a few years later when I cared for my dying father, I learned about the profound comfort provided by palliative care. When I wrote my thesis, I discovered how healing it can be to write about such experiences. To each of the Kalanithi Award recipients, I so admire your resilience in moving through uncertain and possibly heart-wrenching experiences and having the courage to write with so much eloquence. Your effort will be remembered by the many individuals who will read and reflect on it. Congratulations, and thank you for your heartfelt gift." And it's now my pleasure to introduce an outstanding physician writer who served as our ranking judge this year, Dr. Daniel Mason. Daniel is an assistant professor in the Stanford University Department of Psychiatry and the author of The Piano Tuner, A Far Country, The Winter Soldier, and A Registry of My Passage Upon the Earth, which was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. Daniel's work has been translated into 28 languages, adapted for opera and the stage, and awarded, among others, a Guggenheim Fellowship, the Joyce Carol Oates Prize, a California Book Award, an O. Henry Prize, and a fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts. His 5th book, North Woods, will be published by Random House in September. So Daniel will be introducing the first prize winner. Daniel, we're so happy that you could join us this evening. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much, Lucy, and thank you, Jackie, and everyone for being here. It's a real honor. I went through training, I think, overlapping a little bit with Paul. Unfortunately, I never met him, so I feel like I only got to know him through his amazing book. And actually, my editor now is the editor who you worked with for his book. So I've sort of heard stories about what it was like to pull that amazing project together. So it's a real honor to be here. This was a very hard contest to judge, and I feel like at the end, all the finalists were very deserving, and it was tough to choose. But in the end, the story that I chose as first place was "Sick Girl Goes on a Date" by Alyson Lee, and so Alyson is a first-year medical student at the University of Pittsburgh. After studying at the University of Virginia, Alyson completed a master's in narrative medicine at Columbia University. And there she celebrated her love for writing and explored ways of expressing the patient experience, including her own firsthand experience as a person living with chronic illness. She's passionate about integrating writing, literature, and the arts into her ethos of patient care and hopes to be a voice for those medical students or providers who live between the kingdoms of the healthy and the sick. Alyson, I wonder if you could start by telling us the story behind your piece.
Hi, everyone. I'm grateful to be here. I'm very honored and humbled by this recognition. So I wrote this essay, I suppose, to talk about some of the things that we don't often talk about when it comes to living with illness, especially in my experience as a young female. I first got diagnosed with a pretty serious illness in 2018 when I was a junior in college. And I think initially I had hoped it would inspire some sense of enlightenment, where suddenly I would only be pondering the higher things in life. But instead, one of the first thoughts that I had was, who's going to want to date me now? But I believe that these questions and topics such as dating or your body image or your sense of self are just as important as the lofty ones. And I think that as patients, and maybe especially as women, we can convince ourselves that these topics are frivolous or superficial, but I feel like they are deeply enmeshed with what it means to be human. So this essay takes us into the mind of Sick Girl, who is the persona that I give to the part of myself that is sick. And we follow her as she ventures out on her first date after her diagnosis. And we sort of see how illness robs the casual out of these encounters, where a date isn't just a date and you're forced to think about very serious questions pretty early. Not just, do I like this person, but would this person be a good caretaker for me if I become really sick? So this excerpt begins beginning at the table as Sick Girl sits down and starts to talk to her date. They say you shouldn't talk about anything traumatic on a first date. We had not even finished our appetizers before I told him that at age 20, I had a stroke. I had lost function in my fingers and legs. I had a worm in my eye and got dewormed like a horse, and I'm slowly losing vision in my right eye. I had meant to tell him the cute version, that I had had a stroke and it was crazy, but he never interrupted and looked at me without pity, so I kept telling him more. I said, once a month, I get lasers burned in my retina to kill cells that are trying to attack me. I said, at one point, they thought I had cancer, but no one had the heart to tell me. I said, they never figured out why this happened. And I laughed the whole way through, with a few well-timed, self-deprecating jokes, watching him carefully to see if he laughed too. I said, well, yep, that's my shit, and looked at his eyes, the hands in his laps, to see if he was anxiously picking up them. But he looked me in the eye without a note of irony and said, I guess what I can say is, you're incredible. I can say then that other things happened on this first Sick Girl date. He told me he read Pilgrim's Progress 3 times cover to cover, and I laughed and said, that's hot. He asked me what my favorite basic science class was, and I said cell biology. The C train was late, so we took the 1, and he told me when he was little, he played Schubert at a recital, and an old dying lady in the crowd was so moved she bought him a baby grand and paid for his piano lessons until she died. And I laughed and shamed him for not playing piano now when this lady had died, thinking she had found the next Mozart. And because he dropped me off at my apartment and said, "When can I see you again?" the first sick girl date became a symbol, a memory to signify the moment when I realized that I had told him everything and he didn't run away. That you could tell someone you have broken blood vessels, but they still desperately want to know why you think N-linked glycosylation is so elegant. The next day, he sent me a picture of his finger, freshly cut from a kitchen knife, wrapped in a Band-Aid with a smiley face he drew on with a pen. He called his bandaged, smiling finger Rex for right index and sent photos of Rex accomplishing various tasks throughout his day. I told him that I named the hypothetical parasite in my optic nerve Edworm and said, "We are basically the same." I guess you could say I was ecstatic, but I could not help but be worried because I had found the first boy to say, "I'm thinking about you," after my body had fallen apart. And I did not trust myself to know whether he really liked me or just liking taking care of me, whether I could call this love when it was really sympathy. One time, my dad stood up when Dr. J suggested a new medication after the first one failed. My dad said, "We won't do that," and pulled me from the room. Later, when I asked why, he said the drug causes infertility and miscarriage. I thought about all the pills I had swallowed and whether I had unknowingly killed my firstborn child. After I missed my period for 6 months, my OBGYN said it doesn't look like I'm ovulating right now. I didn't want to ask her whether that meant I wasn't able to have a baby because I didn't want to think about these questions. I wonder if by the time I'm brave enough to ask, it will be too late. In my darkest of thoughts, I can say I'm glad because I wonder whether this illness I have is heritable and if I would just be giving birth to a broken baby. I can say I am relieved because I do not want my baby to resent me. Sometimes, though, I picture myself in mismatched pajamas, a t-shirt from college and gingham thermal pants, and my head is in my hands, and my hands are in my hair, pulling, and my hands are on my belly, and they are pressing down on my belly button, trying to feel whatever it is that is empty and cold. I pre-mourn the disappointment, because it will be another way my body has failed me. Except in this case, it would fail a lot more people than just me. Because in my picture, I'm always alone. And I know it's because we had tried, but it was too much for him to bear, because he had not pictured his life to turn out this way. And even though this is the 21st century and he told me I'm more than my birthing body, he leaves me for a woman with wider hips and greater follicle stimulating hormones. Sometimes, though, I picture the moment after the doctor tells me bad news, when she tells me the days I have left. I picture what it would be like to sit my children down and tell them, "Mom's not doing so well anymore." And I mourn the wails I will not hear and the words of comfort I will not get to say. I do not even know if this is something I have to mourn, but I am too scared to find out. So I just mourn what I do not know, waiting for the day I do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alyson. It's now my pleasure to introduce our next judge, Grace Lee. This year, we were thrilled to welcome new judges, and one of the judges is Grace. Grace is a fourth-year medical student here at Stanford, and is herself a former winner of this contest, as well as a New York Times best-selling book author. If you haven't read Grace's book, Portrait of a Thief, we highly recommend it. It's now out in paperback and is available on Audible. Grace, thank you for joining us this year.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Daniel. I am so thrilled to introduce Brian Zhao, who is our second place winner. His poem, To Sit With, is so beautiful. It struck me the first time I read it and every time since. Brian is a medical student at Brown University. He was also an undergrad at Brown, where he studied applied math and biology. During his senior year, Brian decided to take a poetry class and has been writing ever since. In his free time, Brian enjoys taking pictures of fungi after a rainy day and rehabilitating forgotten orchids. He is from Queens, New York. Okay. Brian, can you tell us about your poem?
Yeah, thank you so much for introducing me, Grace, and I'm really happy to be here. So my poem is titled To Sit With, and it's born out of a conglomerate of experiences, some with my uncle, who had cancer, and some with patients of mine I had seen during my clerkship year. And the running thread through that was talking to these patients through Chinese, and not through English, which is the language I've learned in school and throughout my education, but with this other language where I can speak it, but I'm not actually able to read or write in it. And then so this poem was sort of born out of thinking about those experiences, and also the limbo of certain diagnoses, and the limbo of speaking in this language that you've inherited in a sense, but you're not sure in the entirety of the language. So yeah, and I'm happy to start reading now. To sit with. They couldn't get a clean cut, that space between abdomen and gut feeling. A year to live or 4, they cannot say. You are incandescent with unknowing. How hard it is to be human in the throne shadow. Like everyone else, you once dreamed of falling asleep forever. But even this piece eludes you now. What can I do but sit with you? Uncle, at night you had no teeth. Your tongue stuck out like a parched nub of sunflower. What did we talk about during those hours when there was only my crisp American and your gum sounds and the soft slur of electricity? Perhaps at the end you knew enough, my touch unfelt against your swollen fingers when I asked you to wake up and the machine cried out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian. That was beautiful. I am delighted to introduce Jackie now, who I've known for about 4 years. Jackie Genovese is the executive director of the Medicine and the Muse program and holds an MFA in creative nonfiction and a master's in medical humanities and the arts. She feels honored to be involved in such important work and considers what she does a calling.
Thank you so much, Grace. And I want to apologize for the I'm pulling some of the strings behind the scenes for the slide sharing screen. So any further mistakes are all on me. So I am delighted. So now I'm going to share the screen for our next winner, so you can see her beautiful slide while I introduce Fiona. Okay, that should see, why does it do that? I put it in present. There we go. Okay. Fiona Miller is a 4th-year medical student at the University of California, San Francisco, and the mother of 3 feisty kids. Her poetry has appeared in JAMA and the Intima, and has been recognized in the Michael E. DeBakey Medical Student Poetry Awards. Fiona is passionate about racial health equity, reproductive justice, and harnessing the power of human stories toward healing. She will enter residency in obstetrics and gynecology at Brown University Women and Infants Hospital this summer. So I'm going to stop sharing. So Fiona, you can tell us a little bit about your beautiful poem.
Sure, thank you. It's great to be here and so nice to be among so many beautiful writers. So this poem, which is called What That Poem Was About, is about the experience of writing a poem, and the sort of background to it is that actually exactly 22 years ago this month, when she was 40 and I was 14, my mom was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, which was obviously a terrifying experience for her in many ways, and also for our whole family, really challenging to just watch, the strongest person that we knew gradually become disabled. And So about 4 or 5 years after that, after her diagnosis, I was attending a summer writing program during which I wrote a poem about my experience of that, of watching my mom get diagnosed with MS. And then many years after that, I wrote this poem about the experience of writing and sharing that poem. So there's like some different levels of meta going on. But I think that, what this poem touches on is just the vulnerability of not only experiencing chronic illness and watching someone you love experience chronic illness, but also what it means to share that experience with other people. And lastly, I'll just say, my mom is as strong as I've ever seen her. She's doing great. She's an incredible advocate for her health and her healthcare. And she's on this presentation tonight. So I'm really glad to have her here. So this is what that poem was about. My mother in her blue flannel nightgown, shuffling down the hall, dragging her left foot like a block of wood behind her, squinting. My mother's soft body in and out of the sarcophagi of MRI machines, objects falling from the hands she thought were clenched. Words like numbness, blindness, scarring, scared. My mother on the toilet seat holding a needle long as her middle finger, diagram of a faceless body showing her where. 40 with a walker, saying my MS, like it was a thing that belonged to her. And me in the middle school courtyard with my friends, saying words like sick, brain, autoimmune. Me in the spoken word workshop at writing camp with the only poem I ever wrote about disease. Me on the stage beginning too fast and the teacher saying stop. What is this poem about? Making me say it. Me swallowing, commanding the tears to stay back. And behind me, my classmates against the wall, knowing, each of us clutching our losses like they were the last things in the world we owned. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, thank you, Fiona. And I'm so glad your mother is on. Hello, Fiona's mother. We're delighted you can join us. Oh, that was beautiful. Okay, it is now my absolute pleasure to introduce our another new judge this year. And I knew her poetry before I knew she also shared an alma mater with me at William & Mary. So there's no guilt there in terms of that. But Dr. Irène Mathieu is an assistant professor of pediatrics at the University of Virginia, where she practices outpatient pediatrics, runs community engaged research and advocacy projects, and serves as assistant director of the program in Health Humanities. She is the award-winning author of 4 poetry collections and has written and spoken about the intersection of poetry and medicine in outlets including NPR, the Washington Post, and the LA Times, just to name a few. And she also had her first poem about being a mom published. Was that yesterday? I think yesterday or recently. So congratulations on that. And we are delighted you're here, Dr. Mathieu.
Thank you. It's really lovely to be amongst you all. And I'm just honored and floored to not only have read so many amazing works, but also to hear the folks who are here reading their works aloud. It's really a treat. So thank you all for being here. I want to introduce our next winner, which is Nicolas Seranio. He's lovingly known by his patients as Dr. Nick. Nick is a native of Southern California with family roots in the American South, Cuba, and Jamaica. He completed his undergraduate degree in neurobiology at the University of California, Irvine, where he hosted the eclectic radio show Beat Surgery at 88.9 FM KUCI. In medical school at the University of Pennsylvania, he developed his interest in urology, galvanized by the loss of his grandfather to prostate cancer. While at Penn, he obtained a master's in translational research where he validated a novel approach to guiding immunotherapy in bladder cancer using circulating tumor cells. As a resident, he is interested in medical education and runs the Urology Audio Guidelines podcast. So Dr. Nick sounds incredibly busy and incredibly prolific, and I'm really excited to hear him talk now about his poem. So can you tell us a little bit about your poem, please?
Yeah, thank you for that introduction. And I'm happy to, create this urology to poetry pipeline. But basically my poem is about Legacy, it's about my grandmother. Her name is Shirley Harris. She is this fiery woman who was born in Jamaica, and her story is a lot about sacrifice, coming to the States, trying to make things, build a better life basically for her kids. And she grew up pretty poor in the projects of Oakland, and basically did everything to give my dad and me the life I have today. And so it's really just about how, we lost her in 2021. And it's about how I see her in everything, in my family and myself, and just kind of a reflection of that. I wear you like a memory. They tell me I have my father's face, but I know my features belong to my grandmother. They belong to Shirley. Our faces are round, with a glass blower's cheeks, all orbiting a bulbous nose. Sometimes I like to imagine them back in their home of Kingston, Jamaica, sniffing the char of roasted breadfruit, or savoring the last morsels of curry goat in callaloo before they dance down her throat. The same throat they find the mass. A time bomb of flesh that leaves no room for boiled dumplings or beef patties, only liquids. I actually think there's a gap here. I have the poem here. My parents pulverized her food down to the atom, made unrecognizable, and her face follows. She is all angles now, as islands of bone emerge from the receding fat, her sunken cheeks in offering bowl. I had never felt her ribs until we hugged for the last time. I learned of her passing on my way to the operating room, and I let myself shatter briefly before promptly returning to work. I intend to schedule my grief, as I know she must have, between the pummeling of her husband's knuckles and the whimpers of her 3 little ones, between working every job at every hour, only to cut her feet on shattered glass after Oakland robs her once again. I know that grief is a luxury. I carry her face to her funeral, and even soggy with tears, it stirs the souls of all who know. Every crease a lyric, every smile a eulogy. What a gift to carry this legacy and to comfort others with this face.
Oh my gosh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much, Nick. I believe Dr. Mathieu is now going to introduce
Me.
Lucy. Yes.
I can take it over. Thank you so much. That is just beautiful. And it's really amazing to see your grandmother's face. So thank you for sharing that poem and your grandma with us. I am now honored to introduce Dr. James Hyun Lee, who authored a brilliant essay called Junk Journal. I really loved this one so much. There's so much in it about love and identity. It's just brilliant. And I really thought about it a lot during our reading and during our judging. So I'm so happy to meet you, Dr. Lee. Dr. James Hyun Lee is a psychiatry resident at the University of Washington who loves freestyle dance, short fiction, accessible mental health care, and gay rights. Accolades include the Irving D. Yellowham Literary Award for his short story, Conversations with Joanne, later published in the Pegasus Review, and a perspective piece published in the New England Journal of Medicine. As a queer Korean American, James is loving life in Seattle, though longing for the day when a corgi can join his household. And this evening, James would also like to send a message that says, much love to Eric, the friendos, and the co-residents. So James, if you could tell us a little bit about your essay, and then obviously we'd love to hear it as well in your voice.
Yeah, this piece is I do want to clarify that this piece is fiction, but it is, it's all about kind of love and relationships specifically love in the setting of when you love someone with a chronic mental illness like schizophrenia, and what we think about with life-limiting illness and what that means, and how love operates in that setting. This story was kind of birthed from a love for this person, and it's written in second person, so it's about you and your boyfriend, and it navigates your relationships with not only you and your relationship, but also his parents, his dead father and his evangelical mother. Yeah, if I'm happy to start reading. If you guys, I organized this slide to kind of show the chapters of this. This is all told in a bunch of different chapters named that are all put in a junk journal, which is a dresser that is filled with different boxes filled with mementos, and that is kind of what prompts each of these memories. I'll be reading excerpts from the first chapter and then the last two chapters. Dad. On your first date, he told you about how Joel died. Queer dating is just exchanging equal parts pleasantries and trauma. He told you how he could not remember much about his father. For some reason, the memories of Joel were inaccessible, so his brain simply remembered around Joel. The fizz of saccharine soda, the stale air of a shared hospital room, the vermilion scrubs of nurses who checked his pulse more and more frequently. 5 years old is a terrible age to lose a father. He told you how when Joel died, he inherited the diagnoses. The month after Joel's death, he was doubled over with abdominal pain and was stamped with type 1 diabetes. Years later, he would start hearing voices, and because of family history, he was express shipped a diagnosis of schizophrenia. 2 for 2, a rough combination. He asked if this was a deal breaker. You said you've had much worse. It's true, you have. Several dates later, after he sneaked you into his place and showed you the frames on the wall, he pointed to the photograph of his 돌잡이, the Korean tradition of setting objects in front of the new one-year-old and seeing which one they reach for. A prophecy of sorts, a calligraphy brush representing intelligence, a stack of coins promising prosperity, a gavel signaling a just nature. He ended up choosing the spool of thread, longevity. His parents were overjoyed. Finally, a son who could break the family curse of dying young. Junk journal. He loved mementos, holding something familiar and summoning the memory back, making sure that it was real, that it happened. Nancy could not tolerate the mess, and honestly, neither could you. The clutter from one-punched punch cards and colorful bobby pins and the disintegrating bag from his first Five Guys burger and dust bunnies and loose jokers made his room a minefield. So, a compromise between everyone. He got to keep some of the mementos, but they had to be organized in some way and fit into his dresser. Throw everything else out. You helped him clean his room so that he could at least see the floor, but it was his idea to group the objects by theme. He found small boxes and containers throughout the house, squirreling each of the objects away with a label in all caps. Now that he is gone, you go through each of the boxes and take in the contents. You're familiar with some of them. Some of them are about you, objects you never thought he'd notice or keep. The napkin from your first date, an empty bottle of your scented sunscreen, the wig you loaned him when he tried drag for the first time. Nancy was livid. It hits you that this was his way of saying goodbye, just in case. Finale. A secret between the two of you. In the case that he died before you could say goodbye, he left a space for you to fill. You kissed the box you made for him, its contents neatly organized inside. It feels heavier than it actually is. The Sharpie on the index card is fresh as you place your box, the 50th, into the dresser, a nice even number that he would have loved. You close the drawer, take in the room around you, set the keys on the desk, breathe in the lingering wisps of gochujang and vanilla and apricot, and the generic laundry detergent that reminds you there are clothes to fold back home. Thank you.
Thank you so much, truly. Congratulations to all of the authors who had their work shared here. We cannot thank you enough. And as you can all see, why. We are having a couple of questions come in, and if it's okay with you, I wanted to ask Dr. Nick a question about, you had this line about scheduling grief, and we have an audience member who's wondering if you could just reflect on that a little bit, what you meant.
Yeah, as I mentioned, it being like a luxury. As a busy resident, I'm busy, taking care of other people, doing, cases, operating, and, if I really think about it and I, talk to my program director and said, hey, I need some time off, I think I would be granted that. But I think there's this mix of, I don't know, this idea of grit and putting your head down and kind of just moving along and getting things done, whether that's right or wrong. But I think that in many situations I've chosen that option, just to kind of continue. And I think for me, it's protective too, right? Like I keep myself so busy that I'm not processing this like devastating thing that happened to me.
It's wonderful to have them touch on that aspect of the complexity of being a human person, grieving and taking care of other people. Jackie, I'm messaging you to see if you have other questions or if you have any and you're able to unmute.
Oh, yes. So sorry, in the Q&A, let's see. Do you have to prioritize right outside of a busy med schedule? And I imagine that can be answered by, yes, it could be answered by all of our, if everybody wants to take a turn on how they do that, that'd be great. Brian, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think, that's a question I struggle, like, I feel like everybody I know who is in med school struggles with balancing med school and everything else. And I think writing especially, which is something where, at least for me, it's a lot of finding time to like think deeply, and that can be sparse in medical school. I think for me, finding time, for me, it's a way for me to be able to think about writing, is to think about it throughout the day in terms of just little things here and there in hospital or in life that just catch my mind, and finding ways to jot that down and basically sort of hover in this sort of writing mindset throughout the day, even while you're presenting a patient or thinking about a diagnosis. Just having that those multiple capabilities in terms of doing that, I think has been really, really helpful for me, so that even when I feel like I don't have time to write, I feel like I'm always circling back to the same questions, or thinking about finding ways that like my mind can catch on things. And that to me has been sort of my approach to balancing that in medical school.
Thank you, Brian. How about you, Alyson?
I think I'm just starting out. I'm a optimistic first year medical student. So I have lots of hopes and dreams that I will always find the time to be creative and write and be among other writers. But definitely I can already feel that it is difficult. I think finding like accountability, I suppose. I feel very lucky that my medical school has quite a lot of support. And there have been many physician writers and also a lot of people in my class who are very interested in writing. So we just started a like kind of informal creative writing workshop series / circle among people in my class. And so I'm excited to take advantage of those things, but I think it takes intentionality. You have to carve out that space and time. And I think in medicine, there's always competing things for your attention and time. So you have to, I guess, be more disciplined about it than when I was an undergrad and I was taking writing classes and it was ingrained in my schedule. But I agree with Brian a lot that taking the time and kind of seeing the poetry in the world around you as you go about your day is an important part of being a writer.
Thank you. Fiona, how about you?
Yeah, sure. I think you know, what's been said really resonates with me as well. I think one thing I've done is I have like one of those little like 3x5 moleskin notebooks that I like just like carry around with me in the hospital, or you know, if I'm in the hospital or wherever I am, and just like writing down things. I think that like the things that people say are always to me like the most poetic like possible things. So I love writing down like things that I hear, things people say to me, patients say to me. And yeah, and then sometimes, you know, I think that can like sit for a long time, but you can always go back to those notes and, you know, those are always alive. So I think it is just a matter of like piecing the time together that you need, and also doing what you can to like, you know, in terms of accountability, like Alyson was saying, you know, for example, this year I had to do you know, a capstone project to graduate from medical school, and I made it a narrative medicine project so that I could write. So I think that that's, you know, things like that are really helpful.
Great. And James.
Yeah, I think that I'm someone who needs a lot of like impetus. So like that's why I like short story contests, and you know, like that's why things actually like really compel you to write in a really important way. And it's nice having a deadline. It's also nice to not have a deadline. So there's pros and cons. But I found that like being really intentional, I think like everyone else has said about writing, is, yeah, it takes a lot of time and energy, and it's time and energy that, you know, sometimes is diverted away from other things that are important, like loved ones or work, and but it's still something that's worthwhile and feeds the soul, and that feels really important to balance. So yeah, but I like a short story contest to really get my creativity flowing.
And speaking of that, one of the questions we had in the chat was when will we see all of Junk Journal? And Christy posted in the chat, all of the winning pieces will be published on our website and in oh my gosh, I'm not going to say the word right. It's a medical word, osteomosis, our wonderful journal. Rescue me, Lucy.
Osteomosis.
Can you see the other questions, Lucy, in the Q&A?
Yes. I think here's a question. If there's, for the people who, well, let me just ask, I'll just ask the question. If this was something personal that you were reflecting on and writing about, did you write immediately after the incident, or did you write after long time reflection? I don't know if anyone wants to answer that.
Yeah, I'll answer. So like James was saying, I think having some sort of yeah, something I'm writing for is helpful. But what surprised me was when I started writing how quickly stuff was coming out. And so kind of going back to the point of, you know, being distracted by work and not processing things, I think that happens in a lot of ways. And when I started writing this, I realized, oh wow, I actually haven't really reckoned with this yet. And I think that's part of it. I think it's part of one being, yeah, feeling like you're in a position and place to like reckon with whatever you're writing, and also being prepared to like answer for it and talk about it.
Thank you. There's another logistical question, which is for people's family members or loved ones or anybody else who wants to watch the video. We could share how that will happen. I know this is being recorded.
Correct. And as long as I have permission from everybody, we can put this on our YouTube channel, and if someone wants to be edited out, that's fine as well. But yeah, we will put it on our YouTube channel. Thank you. And I think there was an earlier question up about STEM, something about STEM.
Oh, yeah. Okay. This is the last question that I'm seeing, but if other people have questions to ask, feel free to put them in the Q&A. How do you get inspired to write, and how do you get better at connecting the humanities to STEM?
I can start off, but at least for me, I sort of had more of a STEM background before I even started going into poetry, and it was actually much more convergent than I expected it to be, in the sense that um, with any STEM field, you're learning like a whole new vocabulary, you're learning a whole new way of thinking, and that's really what poetry to me felt like, was trying to capture. How can we sustain multiple ways of knowing, and how can you think, to be human is to think both logically and rationally, but also have that creativity, which is a place that logic can't really reach sometimes. And for me, like I have had so much, I feel like I've had so much inspiration actually from the STEM fields that I've been exposed to, and from medicine, all that preclinical studying and memorizing all those, acronyms and whatnot. There's, being able to, I think it was hard to take a step back and be like, oh, there is like something beautiful and poetic in all of this. But that's how I felt, at least, between STEM and the humanities. Not that there is this big divide, but that there's just there's so many bridges between them that are still unexplored. So.
Thank you so much for answering that. And thank you so much to all of the winners who answered those questions. It was really generous of you to do so. I think we'll close.
But Lucy, did you see the
Yeah.
message from Paul's family in the Q&A? I just wanted to make sure you saw.
Wait, what's that?
Yeah, that message from Paul's family. Let me read it. Let's see.
Great.
Watching this, we feel saturated by satisfaction. Paul and Sujata Kalanithi.
Saturated by satisfaction. Well, on that note, I think everyone who is here probably feels that way. And again, it's really wonderful to have heard these voices. There is a recording, so if you missed it, or you want to share it with other loved ones or colleagues, you can feel free to do so. If anyone here does not want this to be on YouTube and be public, you also can feel free to write to us about that, because we have other ways that we can share it in addition. This contest will happen again next year. It will be open on November 1st, and then with a deadline on January 2nd. And you can be on the Medicine and the Muse listserv if you want to stay apprised of that. We'll put a link to the website in the chat. And then we wanted to mention one other event before we close, which is something that's coming up in person in September. It's the Big Ideas in Medicine conference, and it's going to be at Stanford. It's featuring leaders in academia, business, policy, and journalism who will bring their lens to the topics of health equity, AI and big data, aging and longevity, and oncology. And so the link to that conference will go in the chat too. And that's a multidisciplinary thing that medicine and humanities in Stanford is really involved in. So thank you again so much for joining us. Congratulations. We are just incredibly grateful that you shared your brilliant, brilliant work with us. So please keep in touch, and thank you.
Last round of applause for everybody. Yay! Thank you all so much. So much talent and love. It's just amazing. Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. Oh, I can raise my hand. I always hate like pushing leave, on the webinar. Anybody want to say any last words before we head out?
Saturated with satisfaction.
Yes, I know.
Good
That's
night.
fantastic. Yeah.